Hello and welcome to the intro class for the Customer and Policy Overview training. Today's class is going to focus on how to enter a customer or prospect into the system, how you can convert a prospect to a customer or vice versa, how you can add a policy manually into your system, and we'll be going over the different action options and the different tabs of information that you'll see on the customer overview screen or on the policy overview screen. The screen we are currently viewing is the QQ Catalyst dashboard. This is the first screen every user will see when they log into the system. If we wish to search among our existing contacts or policies, we can access the contacts library from anywhere in the system by clicking on contacts from the top navigation toolbar. Here in the contacts library, we can search among all our existing contacts and policies from this page. If I want to see all of the different criteria that the system will search across, I can hover my mouse over the search bar. If I want to edit any of the criteria here, to narrow down my searching, I can click on the More drop-down option and I can check or uncheck the boxes for the different search criteria. I can search for multiple criteria at once as well. Currently, when we access the contacts library, we'll be showing you your most recently accessed accounts. So I can easily jump back into an account that I was working on previously. If I need to search for a different account, we can begin typing in here. And if I search for a contact that brings me many results and I want to narrow down the search, I can simply include a space and start searching for another criteria, such as the phone number. So here I type in John with a space 963 and we pull up the only John in our system where 963 corresponds to the area code in his phone number. If we want to search for a specific policy, we can also type the policy number directly into the search bar as well. However, if we need to narrow down the search criteria specifically for a policy, we can change the search from contact to policy, and then I can narrow down to the line of business or the office location it's assigned to, or again I can click on the More option to show things like the effective or expiration date range that we're searching in. Keep in mind you will also have the option here to show all accounts based on the search criteria that you have selected. You'll have that option when looking at the contact specifically as well. Once we specify at least a contact type, I can show all accounts here also. Whenever we are going to want to add a new contact type to the system, regardless of the type, you're always going to start with the New Contact option from the very bottom toolbar. The very first step when we get to this page is going to be to specify the contact type. Now, in the initial setup training webinar, we cover adding the different contact types that your system administrator will need to set up prior to using the system. In today's training, we are going to look specifically at the prospects and the customers. I can select a prospect and I can later change them to a customer, or I can take a customer that it does not have policies on it and change it back into a prospect. We'll show you how that process works. I'm going to start by selecting them as a prospect. We'll indicate their type as either personal lines or commercial lines. And we can indicate if their status is going to start as active or if we need to put them in as inactive. You can always change from one to the other here, and you can convert from personal to commercial and vice versa here as well. We can specify the agency office location that this customer or prospect is going to be assigned to, and then we could enter in their name. Now we can click Next to go through the step-by-step process for all of the information the system will allow us to enter on this contact, or we can click Finish at any point in time to complete the process or to skip any remaining steps and go directly to the overview page for the contact that we're creating. If we do click Next, we'll enter the guided workflow process. Here in the guided workflow, the different steps are displayed at the top, and I can click on them to go from one step to the next or to any step in the process. We can also use the page buttons at the top right and the next and previous buttons at the bottom, and notice that the Finish option is still here. So again, if I only have certain information to enter at this time, I can put it in and I can click Finish whenever I am done. All of the steps that we would have skipped are still listed here under the Customer Information tab now that we're viewing the Active Prospect Overview screen. We can see the basic contact information, the addresses, the personal information. Notice as well we have a navigation box on the right that will allow you to jump to these different boxes of information quickly and easily. So I can jump down to my linked accounts, to my social media contact at the bottom, or I can click on the top arrow to go back to the top of the page. Notice that all of the boxes of information here, we still have the ability to edit or to add information even after the workflow process. Notice as well that the secondary darker gray toolbar at the top of the screen now has different action buttons that are specific to the contact we're viewing. You will have the ability to delete, copy, or merge this contact into an existing contact. We can change the status from active to inactive, convert to a customer or back to a prospect, convert to commercial or back to personal lines, or we can change the agency office location that they're currently assigned to. The billing and paying options will currently be grayed out while this is a prospect in our system. In order to be able to take these different actions, we will need to change the prospect over to a customer before we can bill them or record any payments. You'll have the option to print or email to any contact that you're currently viewing in the system. We can access an Accord form from our Accord form library. You can do this on the customer or on the policy specifically. If I'm on a policy, the Accord form will automatically associate to that policy. If I access the Accord form library from a prospect or a customer, it will automatically associate that form to the contact itself unless I specify a policy within that contact that we want the form associated to instead. We can create a task from the top toolbar. You also have this ability from the bottom toolbar with the new task option. There is no difference whether I choose to start the new task from the bottom toolbar or from the top toolbar on the specific contact or policy. Either option I choose, the task will associate itself to the current contact or policy that I'm viewing. I have the ability to add a note, which would be any permanent comment that we would want to include on this contact. We can generate a policy summary and a policy proposal, and we have the ability to add a new policy manually into the system. If you are going to be doing carrier downloads, you would not need to create new policies manually if they're going to be downloaded from the carrier. The same goes for the contact. Aside from the information that we first entered when we created the contact, which is all listed under the Customer Information tab here in the center of the screen, there are some additional tabs of information specific to this contact. We have a list of their policies here, which we can see under the Policies tab. Any policies that are active, expired, or canceled will be listed above, and any policies that are still in a pending status will be listed separately below. In Catalyst, whenever you create a new policy manually in the system, it will go in first as a pending policy until we tell the system that the policy is active and in force. Also on this Policies tab, you will have the ability to sort your policies by the drivers, locations, or vehicles that are listed in the policy details. The Billing tab is going to show you any billing transactions that have occurred, any bills that were created or payments that were taken on this customer's account. We do have a class that focuses on billing and payment options in the system, so we'll only be briefly touching on these today. If you need to review any of the other training classes that we have available or register for any of the other live webinars that we conduct weekly, you can always hover over your username in the top right of the screen and access those classes under the Support Training option. The registration page for the live weekly webinars, which are free to register for as many times as you'd like, are listed under the Training Classes page here. The on-demand training link will take you to all of the recorded versions of those webinar presentations as well. You also have access to our Help Center at any time when you're in the system. Again, hover over the username in the top right of the screen and click on the Help option below. This will connect you to our searchable knowledge base full of different frequently asked questions and different procedures on how to operate effectively within the system. Now, aside from the Billing tab, we also have the Files. Any files or attachments that you need to upload to this prospect or customer's account. We can either drag and drop files to this screen, or we can click here to select files to add as well. Any Accord forms that we generate and save in the system would be listed under the Accord tab. Any editable Accord forms we can always go back into and make changes to. Those will be listed separately above. The history list below will show those forms and the holders that they were sent out to once you choose to either print a PDF copy or email those forms out to specific contacts. Next, we would have the Tasks and Notes tab. Any tasks or reminders that I set that are associated directly to this customer or prospect are going to be listed here. Any notes, which again were any permanent comments, would be listed down below here. The system activity log is going to list all of the system-generated notices, such as whenever there's a change made to a specific contact or policy. It will also list all of the notes that your agents have entered into the system. I can also create a new note directly from within the activity log here. We have the ability to sort the system notices separately from the agent notes, or by default we would be viewing all activities in the activity log. These will all be date and time stamped, and it will tell you who made the changes or who entered the note. You can add additional comments to these as well, but you cannot delete or edit any of the activities for E&O purposes. The very last tab here is for text messages. If you have any text message conversations going to or from this contact, those conversations can be tracked here under the text messaging tab. Now, if we want to enter a new policy into the system, or if we want to start working on quotes for a new policy, we're going to click on the New Policy option from the Action toolbar at the top right. Just like when we were adding a customer, when we're adding a new policy, we can go through a workflow process in the system, which will guide us step by step through all of the information we can enter. Here I'm going to start by selecting the policy type, whether it's a single line of business or if it's a package policy containing multiple lines. Next, we can select the line of business. Next, we can enter the effective date and the policy number if we know them at this time. You can leave the policy number pending if you need to edit it at a later time. And we can select the term of this policy. How often is this expiring and renewing? Is it annual, semi-annual, quarterly, monthly, or variable if we need to specify an expiration date that doesn't fit into one of these categories. Let's say this is our semi-annual personal auto policy, and I can click Next again to go through the step-by-step process in the workflow. Just like before, we have the steps of the workflow displayed up top, and I can jump to any steps in the workflow and enter as much or as little information as I have at this time. We can click Finish again at any point to go directly to the overview screen for the policy that we just created. Anytime we create a policy manually, it will go in as a pending policy. So notice we are now here on the pending policy screen for the customer Henry White. If I need to jump back up to the customer level at any time, I can click directly on his name here. And now that we have a policy entered, we should find it under the Policies tab. We did put it in as a pending policy first. I can go to the pending policy by clicking on the description link. And now I'm back on the pending policy screen. Notice from the pending policy, we have some different tabs in the middle and some different action buttons at the top. I can view my other policies under this customer still while I'm on a specific policy. Just like before, we can narrow down the policies listed based on the drivers, locations, or vehicles that are listed in the policy details as well. By default, we would be looking at just a policy list showing us the active, expired, or canceled, and the pending policies below. Our policy information that we had entered is all listed here under the Policy Info tab. And just like with the customer information, we can still edit this information to fill it in or to add additional information at a later time. Policy details are going to contain the detail information such as our drivers, our vehicles, our coverages, our location schedules. And just like before, I can add this information or edit this information from anything that I've skipped over or anything that I've already entered at a previous time. Some of these sections will allow you to import from the information that you already entered on the contact level. So for drivers, I can import from the contacts that I had entered, so I don't have to re-enter some of that information. If I need to go in and add additional information, I can click on the name and I can edit. We can add our vehicle information, and once we do, we can also list out our coverages, liability and physical damage coverages. Any other additional interests, we would also need a vehicle on the policy first before we can enter this information. Now, your policy details tab is very important for things like system generated policy proposals or policy summaries, and also for your accord forms. Information that we enter into the details tab can be used to pre-populate your accord forms. That way you're not re-entering the same customer or policy information more than once. The Files tab is going to hold files, attachments, images that you've uploaded directly to this policy. So any files that we upload here will be immediately associated with the policy. If we're viewing files under the policy, we're only going to see files associated to this policy. When you're on the customer page, you will be able to see all files associated to that customer, and if they're associated to a policy, it will also indicate the policy number as well. The same goes for accord forms. We have an accord tab under each specific policy also, so we can see accord forms specifically related to this policy. And when we're on the customer, we would be able to view all of the accord forms under that customer, as well as which policies they're related to. The history works the same way as well. Any accord forms that we've sent out, an entry will be created in the history below so we can see who they were sent to, who they were delivered by, and what day they were delivered on. The tasks and notes will also show only tasks and only notes related directly to this policy when we're viewing the policy page. When we're on the customer, we can see all tasks and notes related to that customer as well as the policy association. Any quote information that we would want to track in the system, we can enter under the Quotes tab. You do have an option to enter some quote information at the time that you're creating the pending policy, but if I have not done so, I can add a quote directly from here. I would need to have a quote in the system in order to generate a policy proposal. If I do enter quote information such as the writing carrier, the premium, and the fees, I would not have to re-enter that information at the time that I go to issue this policy in the system. You'll notice as well that the toolbar at the top of the screen has changed and now has buttons and actions specific to the policy we are viewing. We can delete the policy. We can take a policy action such as real-time inquiry with the carrier. Real-time inquiry would need to be set up with our product support team. You can access their contact information under the support training link. Real-time inquiry is on a carrier-by-carrier basis. If your carrier participates with IVANS, there is a possibility that they also participate with real-time inquiry. We can issue this policy when we're ready to indicate in our system that the policy is active and is no longer in a pending status. Once I go to issue the policy, I will indicate who the writing carrier is and what the premium and fees are going to be, as well as how this policy is going to be paid for. We can also void this policy transaction if it is not going to be going into effect. Once the policy is in an active status, you will have the ability to renew, rewrite, create a future policy term, mark it with an intent to cancel, cancel the policy, or reinstate any policies that have canceled. When the policy does come up for renewal, I will want to use the policy action to renew the policy or to create a future policy term. If I just go and create a new policy for the renewal, there's not going to be a link between the two policies showing that the policy that was expiring has now been renewed in our system. And when you're running reports on expiring policies or policies that have renewed, you would not see that the policy has renewed correctly. So when you are going to indicate the renewal period has begun, we can click Renew to create the future policy term and immediately put it in an active status, or we can create the future policy option in order to make that future policy term but to enter it first as a pending policy until again we go to issue that policy. We have billing and paying options, which are currently grayed out while the policy is in a pending status. So just like we would need our prospect to be converted to a customer before we could do any billing or paying options, we would need our policy to be activated in the system before we have billing and paying options specific to the policy. I can endorse this policy manually. If you are doing carrier downloads, you can also process endorsements via the carrier download. We can print or email to this customer, and the email would directly associate to the policy we're viewing. Anytime you send an email from the system, a copy of that email is automatically created and put under the Files tab as well. We can access an Accord form from the policy screen toolbar. Again, any Accord forms we access from a policy will immediately be associated to that policy and not just to the contact. If we access an Accord form from the contact, it will ask us if we want to associate it to any existing policies or to just keep it associated to the contact. You have the bridging option from the policy toolbar. This will allow us to connect to one of the outside rating systems that Catalyst integrates with. You may be prompted to enter some user information here in order to connect over to the rating system. This will allow you to bridge your customer and policy information from Catalyst to the outside rater, and any quotes that are created in the rating system you can bridge back into Catalyst as well. If you need assistance with setting up the bridging or figuring out how the bridging process works, you can contact our product support team for assistance. I can add a task or add a note just like before when we were on the customer. If I do add a note here, it's going to be associated directly to this policy. The same with the task. If I choose to add a task at this time, it will associate not only to the customer but to the policy that we're viewing as well. And we have the policy proposal option. When this policy is no longer in a pending status, but we have issued it and moved it to an active status, policy proposal option will become policy summary. You would have both options available when you're viewing the customer screen directly. Both options use a system-generated template that they're going to pre-fill based on the customer information and policy information that you already have entered into the system. This will also include the information that you have listed under the Policy Details tab. Now this is going to cover everything that we wanted to go over in the introduction class to the customer and policy overview. Next, you may want to check out our intermediate class for customer and policy overview. Again, any of the classes that you would like to register for live sessions or view recording sessions of, we can access under the support and training option here.